Welcome, friends. Good evening to everyone, and good morning to. Welcome to my podcast, Global Focus by Hari Prakash Sinha. Just to give you a background story about our today's podcast, India has always prided itself on being a regional powerhouse, but in recent years, there has been an alarming shift. China has begun quietly but assertively building its influence around our borders, from Pakistan to Nepal, from Sri Lanka to Maldives, many of us are starting to wonder, is India's strength is being strategically challenged? So how does this impact our everyday Indians? This episode unpacks the dynamics of China's containment strategy and what it means for India's future. So tune in to discover the inside story of geopolitics in our backyard. Imagine waking up to find out that your closest friends are now siding with someone who challenges you every move. India faces this today as China steps in, building bridges, ports, and even political alliances in our neighboring countries. But why and at what cost? So, how it affects we Indians? Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast on India's strategic challenge and China's influence. Today, we are joined by Dr. Adityanjee, President of the Council for Strategic Affairs, a renowned expert on foreign policy and international relations. Dr. Adityanjee, thank you for being here with us. Your insights will be invaluable in helping us understand the complex dynamics shaping India's position on the world stage. Welcome to the platform once again, Dr. Adityanjee.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha, for inviting me to your newly revamped platform, Global Focus. And I'm happy to be here to talk about the Chinese encirclement of India.
Yes, sir. So I am coming to you with my very first question on China's intention. How serious is China's encirclement strategy towards India? Are we as a country underestimating the real motivation behind China's deep involvement in our neighboring country? So what's your take, sir?
This understanding of China's imperialistic, expansionist, and hegemonic intentions has been underappreciated since 1947. There was a famous letter by India's Home Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, to written that Prime Minister Nehru about, Chinese intentions in Tibet and other areas.
I see.
So we have consistently underplayed Chinese intentions. For almost 25 years, some of the strategic analysts have talked about China's string of pearl strategy to contain and encircle India. And it was initially kind of poo-pooed that it did not make much sense. I remember a famous statement by late Defense Minister George Fernandez. When he made this statement, I don't think he was a defense minister, but he had raised the issue in Parliament, in Lok Sabha, about China building a base in Coco Island. And again, it was kind of, trashed and said, no, there is nothing. But now we know that China is a tri-service base in Coco Island. Each year there are new constructions. And incidentally, Coco Island was gifted to Myanmar by Indian government under Nehru. So we have consistently underplayed what China is doing, and it gives actually advantage to China because it quickly, fills the strategic vacuum.
Yeah.
And it is not just in Indian subcontinent. I will be talking about India's near abroad. Everyone knows about what China, Pakistan strategic alliances. So we will not
Yeah.
talk about Pakistan much, but let's go country by country.
Yeah.
Let's start with Afghanistan because Afghanistan is part of India's near abroad.
Yeah.
Chinese government has consistently hobnobbed with the Taliban government, both Taliban 1.0 and Taliban 2.0.
Yeah.
Chinese government with Taliban 1.0 wanted to invest in mining for rare earths and had actually put forth a proposal for $4 billion investment in Afghanistan. Under Taliban 2.0, China has not seized any kind of, uh, economic and other influences. In fact, China and Pakistan are moving in a territory called Wakhan Corridor, which is part of Afghanistan Basha Khan province. And this is the only part of Afghanistan that has land border with India, specifically India's Pak-occupied Ladakh region.
Yeah.
So if there is a possibility of India regaining control of Pak-occupied Ladakh and Pak-occupied Kashmir region,
Mhm.
we would have access to land access to Afghanistan through Wakhan corridor. It's a sparsely populated area with only 17,000 people living there. It used to be called Pamir in the past. So China is already there along with Pakistan. Chinese defense forces are there. And I think we tend to underestimate these kind of things. Let's talk about Bhutan. All know about Doklam Plateau crisis of 2017.
Yeah.
But what is not realized that since 2005, when India-Bhutan Friendship Treaty was revised, China has been making access to Bhutan overtures, and they want direct bilateral diplomatic relations with Bhutan, because previously, prior to 2005 revision of treaty revision, Bhutan's defense and external affairs were kind of handled by India. So basically, China is pressurizing Bhutan for territorial exchange and making new claims so that they can, get advantage in Doklam Junction. And they had actually pressurized Bhutan to disregard Indian concerns. So that is the story about Bhutan. Sri Lanka, everyone knows that they have now for 99 years the Hambantota naval port. They also have invested in Colombo port, and Sri Lankan government was allowing quote unquote visits by Chinese research vessels, which were spy ships. Only recently there was a moratorium of 1 year for visits by Chinese ships in Sri Lankan ports. So that is about Sri Lanka. Let's talk about Maldives. Maldives owes China $1.4 billion in loan, which is 20% of Maldives' GDP. And you know that Moizu, after his victory and India Out campaign, visited China as the first country, signed 21 memorandum of understanding,
Mhm.
uh, and China has done infrastructure projects. There's a friendship bridge, Maldives China friendship bridge that connects two islands. And China has been given an island, an uninhabited island, which is very near Maldives International Airport, to a Chinese company for 50 years on lease. So you know what will happen. It will become de facto Chinese naval base, that particular island. Let's talk about,
But our base is also nearby Lakshadweep Island.
well, the fact is that where is Maldives geographically and
Mhm.
where is China? It's not a question of our bases nearby there. The China is trying to encircle India. China is trying to become quote unquote an Indian Ocean power.
Yeah.
That's the message people are forgetting. that if you have a naval port in Hambantota, you have a base in Djibouti, and you have a naval base in Maldives in this island which is called Fedhu Finolhu, and they have naval base in Bangladesh. China has three naval bases in Myanmar. One of course is the Coco Island I mentioned about. There is Kyaukpyu port that China is developing as both commercial port as well as naval base. And also in Irrawaddy River Delta, there's an island that has been given to China that is controlled by PLA Navy. And this island is called actually Hengi Island. Further to this, China has a naval base now in Cambodia. It's called Ream Ream Naval Base. It is in the Gulf of Thailand. And initially, it was supposed to be just a Royal Cambodian Naval Base, and they had the government of Cambodia under Hun Sen had said that no, we are not giving it to China, but China now controls it. So we do not realize what China says and what are his intentions. In Thailand, China is making a major push. So for last 200 to 300 years, there has been talk about building this Kra Canal, which will, be like Panama Canal or Suez Canal, but it will sort of, connect the Andaman Sea and Bay of Bengal with Gulf of Thailand. Uh, Apparently, it is not geographically possible because it'll be a daunting task because a lot of mountains and all. But China has encouraged Thailand to create a land bridge. It's a $28 billion investment uh, by a railroad and, by sort of, road transit for Chinese economic, goods to be transported across Thailand in the shortest possible way, uh, avoiding the Strait of Malacca. Now, we talk about Myanmar, I talked about the bases. China is also investing in Myanmar economically, although the government in Neighbourhood uh, is somewhat lukewarm. There's a project as part of BRI, and that is called China-Myanmar Economic Corridor. Remember, China had invested $64 billion in China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. It's a similar kind of thing, but it has not gone off the ground because of internal situation in Myanmar. But more important than that, China is providing arms to Myanmar armed forces, but simultaneously, it is also providing arms to almost all the rebel groups, all the tribal armies and militias in Myanmar. Some of them actually are fighting Myanmar government. Some of them are, fighting or creating a security threat to Bangladesh. Some of them are creating security threat to Bharat. So China has its finger in every pie. And I think we need to understand what is the Chinese strategy. Traditionally, the Southeast Asia region used to be called Indo-China by colonialists. Now, there's no Indo left in Indo-China, it is all China because because our foolish economic policies, socialist model, adoption of socialist model, we did not grow our economy in first 60 years following independence. And China, despite being communist country, accepted capital investment from the West from 1971 onwards. And right now they have $4 trillion in foreign exchange reserves. Despite the headwinds in Chinese economy, they still have a neat cushion of reserves, foreign exchange reserves, that they can use to influence the policies in India's near abroad region.
So, sir, I'm moving to the next question. Coming to Pakistan, Pakistan influence. With China, Pakistan forming a stronger alliance, where does this leave India in terms of regional security? Can we truly defend our interest on two fronts, especially if tensions escalate? What do you say, sir?
So I think at this point in time, we should not have any illusions about two fronts. It's just one front. China has converted Pakistan into an economic colony.
Yeah.
De facto. De jure may be a different thing.
Hmm.
But for all practical purposes, Pakistan has become part of extended Chinese territory.
Hmm.
You know, Chinese PLA has access to any part of Pakistan wherever they want to go. They are building this, uh, or they have built this naval base, which is supposedly a commercial base in Gwadar. PLA soldiers are protecting Chinese workers, Chinese engineers in Gwadar, and time and again, Baloch Liberation Army people actually ambush them. Uh, PLA is present in POK and POL. I've already mentioned that PLA has some presence in Wakhan corridor of Afghanistan. So to consider them as a separate entity is a fallacy because they are functionally the same unit. What most people do not realize that all the weapons that Pakistan claims to have developed, whether it is ballistic missiles, whether it's nuclear weapons, they are of Chinese origin. All they do is that they get everything ready made from China and they will do a test for Shaheen missile or whatever missile and say this is Pakistani achievement. I think what people are not realizing that China is crossing the boundaries by helping now working on Pakistani space program, which would give Pakistan satellite launching capabilities, which Pakistan does not have at this point in time. So this is a real strategic challenge, and you cannot actually take it very benignly that these are two countries. And yes, in situation of war, yes, China has not joined, a, opened a front against India in case of war with Pakistan. Let me be very clear. Yes, we don't want any war with Pakistan or with China. And in the previous war, China has not opened another front against India, but China has done everything else to encourage Pakistan to go to war with India. And we should consider strategically challenge as the same as, from China versus its colony. What is happening in Ukraine? Russia is not facing Ukraine.
Yeah.
Russia is facing not NATO forces, NATO might, NATO weapons.
Hmm.
Now, you don't want to envisage similar situation in unlikelihood possibility of war with
Uh,
Pakistan in future because you'll be facing China on your western front. It may not be Chinese soldiers, it may not be PLA soldiers, but all the logistics, the weapons, the support will come from China because of their all-weather relationship.
what is Pakistan military strength at this point of time?
Pardon?
What is Pakistan's military strength? How many?
Look, Pakistan cannot be, Pakistan is a sort of, army with a country. So Pakistan's almost 20% of GDP goes to building up their sort of military. Uh, so, it is a professional army as it has not been successful against India in 3 or 4 wars they fought against India. But nevertheless, you cannot sort of, underestimate, never underestimate the
Yes.
enemy. So consider Chinese military influence in Pakistan as a threat to India, whether they are joint producing fighter aircrafts. Pakistan claims that it is producing fighter aircrafts. Uh, but consider China having capability to shoot satellites in the space. And if China transfers that capability to Pakistan, ostensibly under joint space cooperation, what are the implications? So we have to take actions, preventive actions, as well as, strengthening our capabilities. Uh, Again, China is using a third country in India's near abroad region to create problems for India, despite their rhetoric of friendship, whether it comes as an irritant in Sri Lanka, whether it comes an irritant in Nepal, Bangladesh, Myanmar. You know that in Nepal they are creating trouble, since the new government headed by KP Sharma Oli came back. Well, where does he head to? He heads to China. What does he do? He resurrects a border dispute with India on the tri-junction in, Lipu Lake and,
Villages are there.
at tri-junction, Limpiadhura area. And Nepalese parliament actually in 2020 passed a resolution doing actually a constitutional amendment. And new Nepalese currency that is being printed in China shows that area as part of Nepal. So again, is that Nepal doing on its own, or it's being spurred into this kind of anti-India action by China because both have communist parties, and we know KP Sharma Oli has always been pro-China. We had some leverage with Prachanda when he was the prime minister, but KP Sharma Oli will keep on refurbishing his quote-unquote patriotic and nationalist credentials by irritating India and creating these problems. So again, you see another neighboring country to India that is being instigated by China. So let's not just focus on Pakistan. China is trying to create problems for India because their purpose is to contain India, and their purpose is also eventually to lead to breakdown of India.
Thank you, sir. So I am moving to my third question. Third question is related to economic dependence or debt trap. Countries like Sri Lanka and Nepal are increasingly in debt to China due to expensive infrastructure projects. Is this an economic strategy, a veiled attempt in debt diplomacy? What are the risks for India if these countries become too reliant on Beijing?
We have already seen that when these countries had debt problems, they run to where? They run to Bharat. Sri Lanka did that, Maldives did that, and ultimately we bail them out. So essentially, what we are doing is that we are giving economic aid to China to strike against us.
Yeah.
So they enter into this debt trap diplomacy, both like, let's see the cases of Sri Lanka and Maldives. Uh, India gave billions of dollars to Sri Lanka to bail it out. Why were they in that problem? Because of the Chinese debt trap. So who benefited?
China.
You are seeing transfer of Indian capital to China through Sri Lanka. Similarly, you are seeing transfer of Indian capital to China through
But
Maldives.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we can devise some strategy where we can help the country, but money should not go to China. So can we do some way?
I think it requires, having a tougher foreign policy,
Yeah,
a much more transactional foreign policy,
yeah,
rather than, giving donations or giving quote unquote aid without any conditionalities attached.
yeah.
One of the major problems of Indian foreign policy, irrespective of whichever government has been in power, that we don't link our economic aid in near abroad to strategic objectives. there has to be quote unquote economic diplomacy that takes into consideration India's strategic objectives. And unless we do that, we will be, fools forever to continue to give economic aid to these near abroad countries. And they will keep on revamping anti-India rhetoric, whether it is India out campaign in Maldives or India out campaign in Bangladesh. You know what happened in Bangladesh.
Yeah, yeah,
So it actually is reflective of short-sightedness of Indian policies in the region. We keep on, serving ourselves as a punching bag for these smaller countries
you are
at
right.
the instigation of
Mhm.
China and other powers.
Yeah,
And we keep on offering other cheek to these countries, and yet we keep on giving them economic aid under the fear that China will intervene. So we have to get our act together
yeah,
and link economic aid. I'm not saying don't give economic aid, but give economic aid, link it to strategic objectives. We have this border problem with Nepal. Why can't we solve it? We
yeah.
keep on giving them, preferential trade route access, all those kind of things. Uh, it may make sense not to give any further economic benefits to Nepal and close the open border policy and introduce a visa system.
Yeah,
There's a lot of trafficking of drugs,
yeah,
person trafficking,
yeah.
terrorism coming from Nepal across India. In fact, Pakistan uses Nepal as a hub to spread terrorism against India. So
Bangla,
if
Bangladesh and
you
Nepal both have a porous borders and a lot of illegal activities goes on there actually.
is the open border policy serving India or open border policy serving Nepal?
Yeah.
Nepalese people keep on coming to Bharat using this open border policy to get education, to get employment, and
Mhm.
they remit large sums of money into Nepal. Well and good. We don't have anything against Nepalese people. But the same open border is used by Pakistan to infiltrate terrorists. You know that terrorists from Pakistan were instrumental in this Indian Airlines plane that was hijacked to Kandahar.
Yes.
Uh, it started from Nepal, and despite Indian government's apprehensions, they did not improve the security checks or their airports and all, or their procedures. So, how long can you continue to countenance such overt defiance and neglect of India's security and strategic interests? That becomes the question. So some amount of hardening is required, even
Yes.
in case of Nepal. And we can link, resolution
So,
of the border dispute, a quick resolution of border dispute to any further conditional economic aid.
so my final question is very much related to your idea that you have just expressed. What should be India's response? Has India been too reactive rather than proactive in countering China's influence? What strategic steps should India be taking now to reinforce its relationship with these neighboring nations? So, would you like to add something? You have already answered. So, would you like to add something to it?
It is true that India's foreign
Hmm.
policy since 1947 has been in a reactive mode rather than proactive mode.
Yeah.
We have not taken any independent initiative, diplomatic or otherwise, or economic, that is proactive and strategic in nature. And that has been a fallacy because we believe in ahimsa paramo dharma. We have never, conquered any territory. We do not covet anyone's land. We are a peaceful nation. That rhetoric is actually so much permeated and internalized by our foreign policy and strategic establishment that we cannot take any bold strategic initiatives in the region. And that has been the fallacy that is biting us now. because we feel that we are always at the receiving end, whether it is China or whether it is any other power. China is one of the major powers, but it doesn't mean there are no other influences. We know what happened in Bangladesh. You know, when an elected prime minister was toppled at the behest of another foreign power, major foreign power, because they wanted a base in St. Martin's Island, and a military coup was done, and an Islamist government was installed. Were we sleeping? We, if we cannot manage our own neighborhood,
Yeah.
we cannot say that we are a regional power.
Yes.
First thing is that we have to manage our own neighborhood strategically and prevent other forces, whether they are regional powers or superpowers, from operating in India's near abroad. This will require change in thinking. It will not happen overnight. But then you have to take one baby step at a time and try to solve and contain one problem and seal it off. You cannot, the problems that have been generated because of passive strategic attitude
Right.
have been there for years and decades.
Right.
And you will not be able to solve one problem or all the problems at one stage. So start solving one problem at a time, utilizing India's economic clout and link economic aid and development to strategic objectives without any inhibition, without any shame, without any guilt, and stop giving this attitude that anybody can come and punch India.
Yeah. Right.
There has to be reciprocity in actions, in exchange with smaller countries. The smaller countries have held India hostage using victimhood syndrome, that we are the victims of Indian aggression. And time has come that you have to call that bluff and make sure that India's strategic interests are not harmed by these smaller countries playing one power against the other. And in India's case, it is mainly China versus India, but it doesn't mean that these countries are not playing other powers.
Right. Thank you so much, sir, for your explanation. We are really enlightened with your information that you have provided. So, as we conclude, it's clear that China's growing influence around India's borders, presents both a challenge and an opportunity. It's a reminder that India's foreign policy needs to be vigilant, adaptable, and strategic in protecting our interests and regional security. Dr. Adityanjee, thank you for sharing your invaluable insight on this crucial topic. We are very delighted to have you here. And to
Thank you,
our
Mr. Sinha, for inviting me to your platform, Global Focus. And my last message is that if India has to be a regional power, India has to change the mentality that we are a soft, peace loving nation. You have to be strong and you have to project your strength.
yes, and to our viewers, if today's discussion has sparked questions or ideas for you, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more deep dives into issues that impact us all as Indians. Thank you so much for being here. Meeting you in the next video. Thank you, Dr. Adityanji. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed.